Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Latricchiano here. I hope everyone had a nice holiday weekend, a little bit of an extended weekend, I think. As you know, the university was closed on Thursday and Friday. I also strategically put the delivery of your last assignment, the draft, last weekend because I wanted to make sure you got your break in over these past couple days. So I hope everyone had a good time. Whatever you did, be with family, be alone, be quiet, whatever works for you during a holiday. I uh, also wanted to address some questions I've received regarding the assignment of the white paper and then also questions about publication. Now, this may not apply to everyone, but I think it applies to some of you, where the question is, are we designing a white paper that's publishable? And let me take you through why we have you write the white paper the way we do. So as some of you have noted, that the white paper format would not necessarily be the format that you would submit to a prospective journal for publication. The goal of the white paper is for you to identify an area of concern within your field, within the program that you are uh, completing in your master's. Um, Also, it's an opportunity to um, go through the process of how you might do a literature review. The matrix was part of that process, and then explaining how you've done a literature review was another part of that process in your white paper. And then through the consultation with the literature that you've looked at, can we identify particular themes that are coming out of the literature, or maybe the opposite, are not found in the literature? So this leads to you thinking about, and this is the part that you have not finished yet in your white paper, think about, so what does this mean? What are recommendations for change? What are requirements of leadership? What does it all mean from a perspective of action? So how might I address this problem if this was a problem I was dealing with in my own field, my workplace, whatever it is? So in one way, the assignment is very general, but it's also not quite the rigor that would go into a publishable article. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I thought I did a really good job. And by the way, most of you did a really good job. It's just now thinking about tightening up and focusing more. So, for instance, the problem, let's just use real world evidence as an example. That might be a problem that you've described and defined, and you looked at literature from various sources that talks to that and came up with themes. A publishable paper would be one where you look more specifically at that topic and look closely into what the um, the problem would be in a particular context, which could be in a research context, could be in the context of uh, 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 pushing out interventions or therapies or drugs, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were thinking about publishing your work, you'd want to really think about, how do I make my problem, that's really what you're talking about in the introduction, much more specific and much more dependent on what other scholars have said the problem is, and what parts of the problem have not yet been solved. Okay. As far as moving into literature searches, um, you would probably need to do a much more elaborate explanation of how you have tapped into the literature, and possibly even more search terms and also more databases than some of you have listed. Okay. The literature, the amount of literature, would have to be somewhat expanded and focused at the same time. So, many of you are using anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe I think a couple are 20. A paper for dissemination might need to expand that and to be more critical of which of that research or articles or whatever the case may be um, is really much more focused on the part of the problem that you're trying to solve for publication. The thematic areas that come out of that would typically be the gaps in the literature. So what we don't know. So there's things we know, there's things we think we know, and there's things we don't know anything about. It's really tapping into saying that, well, based on the problem that I've chosen, the literature discusses how to deal with it. However, what it doesn't discuss is the following. And then from there, you would do a discussion of that literature and how there's gaps and holes, et cetera. And for many of you, because of the professions that you're working in, that would ultimately lead to some sort of recommendation and conclusion that says, based on this literature and the way that I've analyzed the literature and what I've extracted from the literature, there are still gaps in the research. There are still areas that are have yet to be explored, and there may even be recommendations. Now, keep in mind, your white paper for none of you has been designed as a research paper. So, and what I mean by that is you have not collected data about your particular problem, analyzed that data, and then went to, so what does this mean in discussion? And then also, what does this mean for recommendations? Now, doesn't have to be a problem because papers are written all the time that aren't based on new data. Sometimes they're not even based on the reanalyzing of old data. However, one of the problems with making a white paper like you've done into a publishable paper is finding a publication that has its own set of expectations that you might have to meet. So, say for instance, and I'm just going to use a journal from my world, um, uh, clinical and translational science is a good example. So, you need to read up on what the journal likes to publish, what their requirements are for published material, and an important thing is what the expectation is as far as length is concerned. Now, these differ for all journals. They even differ in if you use APA style or MLA or, the Journal of American Medical Association. Most health science journals tend to lean towards APA, which is why we have you use that. But it's very possible in a medical journal, possibly. And for those of you in Reg Affairs, for instance, I'm less familiar with the types of journals. They may actually look to a different style sheet. So, where does this leave us? I am thrilled that some of you are thinking about using your work and putting it into format and shape that is something you could submit to a publisher, a journal. Um, I would be happy to consult with you, even co-author with you if you want to go that route, even after the class. Please just reach out to me. I'd be happy to do that with you, go through that process. But I think the message I'm trying to get across here is the depth and rigor of what we have you do for a white paper is not necessarily going to match with what a journal is going to require. And of course, as we all know, a submission goes through peer review of other scholars in your field, and they will come back with things that are usually, I want to say, good and bad about the paper. Oftentimes it's what's not so great about the paper, like they may say this is not an extensive enough literature review, or the problem is not stated in a way where the paper can actually address the problem and provide recommendations. Some journals may specialize in research articles, which is not what you did, and have less interest in conceptual papers, which is more like your white paper. Um, on the other hand, journals that are more professional nature, or maybe even industry journals, may be less concerned about actual research and more concerned about how professionals actually deal or cope with particular problems. So there's a wide range here. And I would say in my general opinion, I think not because this class hasn't done very well. In fact, this class has done very well. Um, the class is not meant to take you through the whole process leading to publication, but getting you sort of a quarter of the way there. So as professionals, with your master's degrees, you can take that work and decide if you want to go forward with it and go through the publication process. But let me reiterate, I'd be happy to work with anyone who's interested in taking it the next step. If you are looking for a co-author, I can help you work on the paper. We can identify a journal from your field that it might be useful to target. And if you plan to have a career where you will publish periodically, it's an important process to go through because you start to understand what's necessary and what peer reviewers and journal editors are looking for. And even if you're not successful, even getting a review back helps you understand, where the holes are in your work. And trust me, as you get as you practice this over the years, you get better at it. You start to understand, okay, this journal is not going to want to publish this sort of thing. In fact, usually they'll tell you what their mission and vision is and what the specialty of the journal is. And when I think about submitting to a journal that I've never submitted to, I read that first and go and think to myself, I'm not sure they're going to want to publish this sort of work. And I might search for another journal. Or I might submit something to a journal and it's either rejected or says that it needs major modification. And then I make the decision, do I want to resubmit to that same journal or do I want to try something else? Because the fit is sort of a tight fit. It's not a good fit. So I hope that's helpful for those of you who have sent me some notes about your interest in publishing. And remember, please reach out to me directly if there's something you want to explore together. And it doesn't have to be within this semester. It could be, next semester, whatever. So please, I hope you take me up on that offer. I also want to just remind us what's left. We're at the final turn of the semester here. These courses go very quickly in 8 weeks. We are technically in week 7. You should be continuing to work on what you will ultimately submit on the 14th of December, which is your final paper. I want to encourage everyone to read the rubrics. It's important that you follow along with that pedagogy that I explained, why we're taking you through this process, and that's all within the rubric. Also, while some of you have already begun to integrate the complexity and change leadership, change management material from the beginning of the semester. If you have not, now is the time. So as you can see, week 7 objective is to apply the complexity and change concepts to the specifics of your topic and your findings, meaning the findings from your literature review. Review and incorporate feedback, both mine and the feedback from your fellow classmates over to the overall manuscript. Then in week 8, sorry, way down here, obviously is your final paper due. It is not due the 9th, it's due the 14th. I will change that. And your reflective practice paper is due at the same time, I believe, yes. My apologies, this course was published without me getting a chance to double check all the dates. But the last assignments, both of them are due on December 14th. So in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, needs time with me, phone call, or continue to just email if you have those sorts of questions. This class is doing really well, and I'm sure the next couple weeks you'll be able to wrap up the product, the final product of this course without any trouble. So I hope my video today was helpful for those of you thinking about publishing. I'd be happy to talk more about it with you, or if there's a group of you that want to get together and maybe have another Zoom session where we can just talk things out, please let me know and we can arrange that. Okay. Have a great week. And wherever you are in the country, I hope it's warm because it's pretty cold here on the East Coast right now. All right. Take care. Have a good week. Thank you. Bye-bye.